Coach Curry, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And I would have to say, you look fantastic.
Well, thank you.
You look better shape than I am.
Well, no, you're in a lot. That is not true. Now
Oh, yes, it is.
You're in great shape. But thank you. That's something that I've got a lot of wonderful doctors. Unfortunately, I need all of them. But one in particular, my neurologist, just stood me up in front of my spine one day. He said, "This is the X-ray of your spine. You see this? That's not a good neck. And down here at the bottom, you see this right here, Bill?" I said, "Yeah, I see that, doctor." He said, "Gain 50 pounds and you'll never walk again." Do you understand? I said, "I believe I got it." Yes.
You got it.
So I do train, and thank you for noticing.
Yeah. So what's your regimen then? What do you do? How to stay in shape?
Now, I'm neither bragging nor complaining, but I have had 5 shoulder replacements. I was always the smallest lineman, and my shoulders just weren't suited for the National Football League, but I love playing, and I played a long time, and I would do it again. What everybody's wondering, would that nut go back out there? Yes, I would. But one time, my brilliant shoulder doctor said to me, "You're going to lose a lot of blood, and I'm not going to do a transfusion because I don't want to risk bad blood at your age. And so you're going to be real weak after this surgery." And I thought, yeah, right. I'm super.
Yeah, you're a man, right?
I recover so fast, and I do. I'm blessed with good genes. I recover quickly from injuries, and I always have. Good thing to have if you're going to play our sport. But this time he was right. I could hardly get around. I was so weak. And for about 6 months, I wallowed around in self-pity thinking, well, gosh, how long is it going to take for my blood to regenerate? And I bumped into a guy that was in his mid-50s. He had 5% body fat. He had washboard abs. And he was a ferocious trainer, owner of a very successful company. He employed me as a speaker several times, and I appreciated that. So I said, "What have you been doing?" And so I got his regimen, and it's very rapid, cardiovascular, stimulating weightlifting. And my father had been a weightlifter, a national champion, and I had rebelled against weights because Pop used to make me lift when I was young. So I had stopped lifting completely. I went back in the weight room. I do a lot of reps, a lot of leg presses, a lot of the only upper body exercises I can do are shrugs and curls and pull downs, but I do them fast, and I get winded and do the cardiovascular, and I've been doing that for about 2 years, and it works, and I recommend it. And people my age, I'm 76 now, if you can do those things, you should be doing them.
Yeah. 76, that's amazing. I mean, again, you look absolutely fantastic to be 76, and I want to be looking like you, and I'm 76, so I need to get that regimen from you.
That's a wonderful compliment. Thank you.
For sure. So when you think about 76 years old, and I know you've shared your journey to a certain degree before, but go back all the way to the earliest days of this love of football and how it began for you.
I hated football.
You hated it.
I didn't even watch football. Not only did I not want to go out, I didn't want to watch it. Look, I had 2 goals in life. Number 1, marry Carolyn Newton. This is about 12 years old. Marry Carolyn Newton, the most beautiful girl in the world and the smartest kid in College Park, Georgia. Number 2 is to pitch for the New York Yankees. And we got this funny thing at our house, this little contraption with a screen like that and some rabbit ears. When I was 10 years old, it was called television. And it had these little garbled figures running around. And the first thing I remember seeing was the World Series. Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Elston Howard. Mickey Mantle was a rookie when I was 11 years old. I was hooked. And so I became a little league pitcher. And I had a gracious manager that let me come out there. I wasn't good enough to be on his team, but he took me anyhow. And I got to where I could pitch a little bit, and I just thought, these are the things I'm going to do. And only one thing kept me out of the majors in baseball.
What's that?
Talent.
That's something big you have to have.
And as for the Carolyn Newton, she wouldn't speak to me for 6 years because I was always in trouble. I was short and fat and mean, but I grew about a foot during high school. We started dating when we were seniors, and December the 15th, we'll have our 56th anniversary.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. I was 50% successful on my goals, but somewhere along the way, I got dragged onto the football field. Because in College Park, Georgia in 1955, I'm serious about this, if you wanted to get a date, you had to be on the football team. And so I stumbled into the locker room for all the wrong reasons. It was a nightmare. We're in College Park, Georgia. It's 102 degrees, no air conditioning, awful equipment hanging on from pipes and stuff. The stench, you could smell it 2 blocks away. Riding your bike to practice at 6 o'clock in the morning, you could smell the locker room. The CDC could do studies of the cultures that developed in those nasty uniforms, and they could have spent a decade just finding out what grows in the and we put that stuff on our bodies. We went out on the field, the coaches started blowing a whistle, and we started running into each other. Now, if I can stand 60 feet 6 inches from you and throw something at you, why do I want to run into you? I didn't want to do that. I was scared. I was chicken. And I decided, as I usually did when things were hard at that age, I'm going to quit. I'm not doing this. They're all nuts. And I had buddies that loved it. They loved going to practice. I thought these guys were sane. They're out of their minds. This ridiculous sport, I'm out of here. I'm thinking about how I'm going to turn my equipment in, and it hit me. I got a problem with the quitting thing, you see, because my father lived at our house. And you didn't quit anything if you lived in Major W.A. Curry's house. United States Infantry, hand-to-hand combat instructor, national weightlifting champion. He said, now, I didn't make you go out there. He did not. He didn't make me go out. He said, but you're out there, you're not going to let your buddies down. No. Guys are counting on you. You're going to stay. You're going to see this through. And then it got worse because they assigned me the position that nobody wanted to play, offensive center. I remember Coach Shattuck saying, well, Bill, I guess you're going to have to learn to hike that ball. I thought, no kidding, Shattuck. Somebody's got to hike it. Now, let's think about this. We got this 13 pounds per square inch oblate spheroid, really hard, and you want me to put it on the ground, spread my legs, and pull it up right there, hard as I can? Are you kidding me? And Tommy Fields, our quarterback, is going to put his hands where on me? No. I mean, Coach.
No, thank you.
Let's discuss this. This is a complex transaction we're contemplating here. I don't want to hike a football. Who wants to hike a football? Worst thing that could have happened for short, fat, lazy Bill Curry, right? Wrong. Here's where football starts to take hold in a young psyche and make all the difference. 4 years later, at Georgia Tech, I learned to hike that ball to Billy Lothridge, a Heisman Trophy runner-up. At the end of my senior year in the Senior Bowl, I learned to hike that ball to Joe Willie Namath. And a few months later, I learned to hike that ball to Roger Staubach and John Hewitt and Bob Timberlake and Craig Morton. And the week after that, I learned to hike that ball to Bart Starr and Zeke Bratkowski. And 3 years later, I learned to hike that ball to Johnny Unitas and Earl Morrill. And then later, on different occasions at different teams, I learned to hike that ball to Bob Greasy and Dan Pastorini and James Harris and Darryl LaMonica, and the greatest generation of leaders in our sport in the history of the game, only because the position of offensive center exists. There was no other position in all of sport that would have allowed Bill Curry to have a career other than offensive center. So if you think you're in a bad spot, try doing it as hard as you can. You may not have a choice. Thank God for my father and my coaches at every step along the way, and my teammates, and I've had so many great teammates and so many, what you see around the walls here are my coaches and my teammates and my family, and they have loved me unconditionally when I least deserved it. And I wouldn't have been there had there not been such a position as offensive center.
When was it the moment, though, then that it became a love?
When did I really start to love playing football?
Yes.
Good question. And most people don't pin me down on that because it wasn't during high school. I liked the games. I never did like practicing in high school. Then at Georgia Tech, I was more worried about a chemistry lab or a calculus final than honestly we were. I mean, we had Saturday morning classes. When we were there, and my NFL buddies always thought this was a lie, but we'd have calculus and statistics on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock and play Alabama at 2 o'clock. And you better be in those classes, because we had a coach named Bobby Dodd. If you didn't go to class, he loved you. He would, even if you weren't a very good player, he would keep you around. You cut class, you would run up and down those stadium steps till you were gagging and just loving chemistry at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's what happened to me. So it was such a strain to do the academic stuff and try to progress. I didn't start a game at Georgia Tech till the fourth game of my fourth year. It took me forever to mature enough just to get on the field at Tech. I'll tell you when I fell in love with it. The Green Bay Packers, my first 2 years, we were world champions both years. And the second year I was a starter because Ken Bowman got hurt. But that was a grind also. When I took the field for Don Shula with the Baltimore Colts after I was traded over there was something about the chemistry and the magic of Shula and his staff. Great assistant coaches. John Sandusky was one. Red Miller was another one. George Young, who later became general manager of the Giants. George was one of our line coaches. Those guys were so great. I couldn't wait to get to work every day. And that's when I fell in love with practicing. And that's when I played football with all my heart, the best I ever could play it. I wanted to be like the great all-pros, you know. And so I set my goal. I want to see if I can play football like Ray Nitschke or like Jerry Kramer. Well, I tried for that. It never happened because they're Hall of Famers and I'm not. But what did happen is that I became the best player Bill Curry could be because of those wonderful coaches. They just kept working and kept working with me. And so the answer to your question, I was about 25 years old before I actually fell in love with it, and then I couldn't wait to get to work every day.
And then that's when you just fully embraced it.
Yeah.
And at that point, did it get to a certain situation where, as you mentioned, that you couldn't wait to get to work, but also just from a career perspective that it was like, I want to do this the rest of my life?
Yeah, and there's an unhealthy component because at the point I became obsessed with being the best player I could be, and I was actually being recognized as being a reasonable player. I mean, I was starting every game on one of the best football teams of all time. Those late 60s Colts, even the team that lost to the Jets was probably the best team I played on, and is definitely one of the best 2 or 3 teams in the history of football, but nobody's going to remember that because we lost the game we could not afford to lose, and the Jets deserved to win that day. But for my love of the game, I became so obsessed that I slipped as a human being and as a husband and as a father, and the football became too important. And that's what happens to a lot of us. And I let that dominate for way too long, and I thank God that my wife didn't kill me or run me off at the time.
So, and speaking of Carolyn.
Wonderful Carolyn Curry.
That's right. So speaking of Carolyn, I know you'd mentioned it took you a while for her to agree to go out on a date. So was it the fact that you were now playing in high school that she agreed, oh, you're a football player now, I'll go?
I was just persistent. I asked her, I tease her all the time. I said, why'd you, okay, you wouldn't speak to me when we were in the 6th grade, and I said I was going to marry you. What happened? You know, all of a sudden when I was a senior, you'd go out with me. She said, you grew a foot. That's one thing that happened.
So you got taller. She had a height requirement.
Yeah, I think so. But we've had a wonderful, wonderful marriage, and we've got 2 great kids and 7 incredible grandchildren, each of whom is brilliant and beautiful. That's an objective viewpoint.
Of course it is. That's right. When you mentioned all of those different quarterbacks that you learned to snap a ball to, and I know there's a fundamental essence of this is how you snap a ball, but what about, did each quarterback say, hey, Bill, I need you to snap it this way. This is the way I like it?
Yeah, every one of them was different. And we didn't have gun snaps in those days. Thank goodness. I think for a smaller center, a gun snap would be a disadvantage because what I learned as the years progressed is that I knew the snap count and Merlin Olsen didn't. Joe Green didn't. Deacon Jones didn't know the snap count. I did. And that was my only advantage. I think if I'd had to do the more polished movement of the gun snap, it might have been harder. I'm not sure about that, but you have to have the center quarterback exchange drill is the first drill in every practice. If you go watch anybody practice that has a decent team, first thing that happens is centers and quarterbacks get on the side and they work on the center QB exchange, because obviously without that, nothing else is going to happen, nothing good for the offense. So every single one of them was different. I even had some good buddies who taught me how to snap to an NFL quarterback. Francis Tarkington was a very good friend of mine at that time. We used to go on vacation together, and he'd say, Bill, the way you're lined up in your stance, NFL quarterbacks are not going to let you do that. So you've got to learn to extend here and there, and here's where you put. And he taught me what to do. And so I just got lucky. Everywhere I turned, there was somebody to help me.
Well, I don't know if it was luck.
Well,
I think there's
proximity.
Yes. And so again, I'm still fascinated that you really didn't fall in love with the game until much later, because a lot of athletes talk about they've loved the sport for a long period of time. So from your perspective then, when you're at Georgia Tech, and so why even try to go to the NFL if you didn't really love the game?
I had no
at that
intention.
point?
I didn't think I was going to the NFL, neither did anybody else.
Yeah, so how did that happen?
I was a 212-pound offensive center on an average Georgia Tech team my junior year, and my phone rang early one morning. I was so clueless. I didn't know they were having a draft. I didn't know the NFL had a draft. I did not know. Now imagine
no clue
that.
at all.
No, did not know they were holding a draft, did not know they had one. Didn't care. And the phone rings, and it's my brother-in-law, Carolyn's little brother, Ronnie, and he says, hello, Green Bay Packer. I hung up on him, I think. I mean, he's very clever. He's always messing with me. He called back. He said, boy, you better get a newspaper. The Packers have drafted you in the 20th round. Well, the NFL had 20 rounds in the draft in those days. And I went and got the paper, and sure enough, I had never gotten a letter or a phone call from the Green Bay Packers.
Nothing at all?
Nothing. And there I was, the 20th round selection. Lombardi had turned to his personnel man, who loved to tell this story. And he said, Pepler? Pat Pepler was his name. It's 2 a.m. We've drafted 19 players. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. Do something humorous with the 20th selection. So they did. And I had another year of college. And in those days, most people drafted as a future went ahead and played their senior year in college. And I certainly needed to do that. And I did. And then became very intrigued with the possibilities, because the Packers handled it so cleverly. The last game of my college career was in Athens against Georgia, and we got beat in the rain, 7-0. We're coming off the field, and standing on the sideline is Red Cochran. Well, he's an assistant with the Green Bay Packers. I mean, a real assistant, not a scout. I mean, one of the guys you see on the sideline on Sunday afternoons. He's standing there, and he said, Bill, I'm Red Cochran. Hello. I'd like to talk to you and Carolyn. Is Carolyn here? I said, yes, she's up here. She came over on a bus. So I go get a shower and get dressed and walk out, and I'm just clueless. I'm just mostly crushed because we didn't win the game. We should have won the game. He said, I'd like to drive you back to Atlanta. I had been drafted by the Oakland Raiders in the other league at that time. So I didn't know at the time that they were already playing keep away. I just didn't know. I was so not just ill-informed, uninformed.
Uninformed, yeah.
He said, I'd like you and Carolyn to go to dinner with me, and I want to talk to you about the Green Bay Packers. And then I'd like you to get on an airplane tomorrow morning and fly to Dallas and watch us play the Cowboys in the Cotton Bowl.
Wow.
I turned to Carolyn, and Carolyn looked at me, and we said, Sure, why not? So we did. And there we are sitting with Marie Lombardi in the Cotton Bowl. We'd been married less than a year. We were 20 years old. It's just hard to describe. No, we were 21. We were 21. Hard to describe the emotions. And Marie Lombardi is like this angel. She was so beautiful and so sweet to us. She loved us immediately. And the Packers were really good, and the Cowboys were really young, and the Packers are killing them. So they come up from the sideline in the fourth quarter and said, Bill, would you like to come down on the sideline and stand next to Coach Lombardi? I said, yeah, I'd like to do that. Well, the game is over, and Coach Lombardi turns to me, shakes hand. We're walking across. He said, come on in the locker room with me. I'm walking with Vince Lombardi, and I'm a nobody from nowhere. And he says, how would you like to play for the Green Bay Packers? I'd love to, Coach. No negotiation, no nothing.
I'll sign right now.
Just imagine that. So the fact that they were so clever had something to do with it. But from that moment on, it was an obsession to me to get ready and make the Green Bay Packers.
What was that first day like when you are there playing on the field for Vince Lombardi with the Green Bay Packers?
Well, even that became problematic because I was in the college all-star game, as they called it in those days, in Chicago. They would take a team of college all-stars and play against the champions from the year before. And the Cleveland Browns, Jimmy Brown it was his last year. And so and Staubach was our quarterback. We had John Hewitt and Craig Morton and Bob Timberlake, and we had a great team. We had Dick Butkus, Gale Sayers, Tucker Frederickson.
That is an all-star team.
And we really played them pretty well in the second half. I think they beat us 26-17, something like that. But so I was 2 weeks late reporting to training camp, which was all the clubs understood that. But I'm on a flight on North Central Airlines, the Blue Goose, and it stops in Milwaukee, from Chicago to Milwaukee, then to Green Bay. And the people come on the plane in Milwaukee, and they said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Curry, you're going to have to get off the plane because your seat is filled." I said, "I beg your pardon? What do you mean?" They said, "Well, we mean you're going to get off the plane, and we'll get you on the next thing to Green Bay." So I walk in there, and I said, "When's the next thing to Green Bay?" And they said, "Tomorrow morning." And I said, "No, I'm due at the Green Bay Packer training camp at 4 o'clock. And they said, "Well, we're very sorry." I said, "Well, I'd like to see the president of North Central Airlines." They smiled and chuckled. Well, maybe you could get the manager, the local manager. So the guy comes out, and I was just desperate. I'm trying to think of anything to say. I said, "Look, your name is, I can't remember his name, but your name, your serial number, North Central, I know who you are. And I want you to understand that I am to report to the Green Bay Packers and Coach Vince Lombardi at 4 o'clock today, and I'm going to be late, and it's because of you, and I'm going to make sure he knows it." The guy's face just drained. He went from that little smile of pacify the jerk and get him out of here. He went to, "Wait right there, Mr. Curry." He went around. I'm not making this up. He goes around the counter. He calls some people down. He sends them out to get my bags off the big plane. He charters a single-engine plane. They fly me to Manitowoc, put me on a North Central van, and drive me to De Pere, Wisconsin, where the Packer training camp was being held, and I walked in 15 minutes early. All because of Vince Lombardi's power.
That's the power of his name, of course.
So everything was like a Hollywood drama, everything. It was just unbelievable.
And when you now look back, what did you enjoy more, coaching or playing?
More and more people are asking me that, and I'm embarrassed at the answer because I enjoyed playing. Selfishly, I enjoyed playing more because I was only responsible for one person's performance. not 100 teenage males. But I love my 100 teenage males, and I love them to this day, and I hear from them every day.
That's amazing.
I hear from somebody 360, let's say 355 days a year, I hear from one or more of my guys. And I love that like my family. But as the selfish part of getting to go out and line up against the greatest football players of all time, see if I could block Merlin Olsen. Not very often. That's what I. but to try.
But you tried.
Try to block Joe Green, Deacon Jones. I mean, it was so thrilling to work so hard all week and see if you can get a game plan. See if you can figure out a way to take your meager little body and pound it into the greatest players of all time and see if you can compete and earn their respect. And that was a thrill that will, well, it lasts a lifetime.
Yeah. Do you have any regrets from your playing days or coaching days?
Yeah, I have a lot of regrets. My main regret is that, as I mentioned earlier, I got so obsessed with my performance and later at the performance of my teams that I didn't spend as much time with my family as I should have. And I'm trying to make up for it.
That's a process.
Yeah.
Right.
The grandchildren have given me a great chance at that. And my children have forgiven me, but it's been some tough times because there's no excuse for it. None. It was all my fault.
And so what are you trying to do then to seek that forgiveness, or what did you try to do?
I'll send them cash and gifts. No. I've written a lot of letters. We've had long, hard conversations about, and I thought we were fine because I took them to all the games, and our daughter was in the press box, and our son was on the sideline with me, and I thought, hey, we're cool. But he played a lot of little league games, and I wasn't there. And as he's grown older, now he has 5 red-headed boys living at his house.
Woo!
He's become very understanding. And our daughter has 2 daughters, and both of them have been wonderful. And Carolyn forgave me a long time ago. She was so sold out. She was such a great team mom. And when you count ESPN, I did 11 years of ESPN, 20 games a year, and she taped all of them and went to as many as she could with me. It's interesting. She wasn't interested in going to Starkville, Mississippi, but when we did the Hula Bowl in Maui, she always found time.
She would sign up for that one.
I think I can go over there.
That's right.
So we kind of enjoyed that too. But and she was captain of the cheerleaders when I played in high school. We have done full-time over 700 football games. And she loves football too. So it wasn't quite as much an issue with her as it was the kids.
Yeah, just because they.
But I would love to have that back because I could have reallocated practice times. I could have been at more of their functions, and I just didn't.
And one of the things that I think you and I have a common thread on is just the impact of sports and what it means to people and how it's intertwined in leadership. And so why is that so important to you, to being able to spread that message, especially when it seems like right now in society we can be so divided at times, but what sports does to bring us together?
Sport. My wife is a scholar and a historian, a PhD in history. She'll watch a political figure and she'll say, he never played a team sport. Wow.
She can pick up.
I know exactly what she's talking about. Because you can't be a racist and step into a huddle anymore. The guys will call you out. You can't be a sexist and be a part of a quality football operation. All the football operations now have females involved in the training room, in the front office, very often in the equipment room, and they're head trainers. They're not just makeup jobs. They are real. So everybody's important. And Vince Lombardi and Don Shula's greatest attribute in both cases, was that they would not allow prejudice. There was no such thing as racism on our team, and everybody knew it. So you were expected to learn to love the guys, whether you started out loving them or not. And for the teams who win and win and win, there are a lot of differences, a lot of different styles, a lot of different formations, offenses, defenses, etc. But the one thing they have in common is a bunch of guys who refuse to let each other down. And when you got that, it is so much fun to run on that field.
And when did you feel that you were truly a part of that first team, the Green Bay Packers?
Probably when I got knocked out being the wedge buster, running into Jim Parker. It's a bit of a fib. I tell the story of, I was a wedge buster on the kickoff coverage, because if you played for Bobby Dodd, you learned how to play on special teams. And so that was a huge advantage. I was a long snapper. It's probably the only reason I made the team. But I was expected to be the wedge buster, and Baltimore Colts had a guy named Jim Parker that was an offensive lineman. At the time, I did not know he was the greatest offensive lineman of the first 75 years in the NFL. He weighed about 8 million pounds, and he was fast, and he was quick. And he was number 77, and I saw him in the middle of the field, and I just took off running and ran full speed he was number 77. I hit him right between the sevens, and that's the last thing I remember. Somebody walked by me and nudged me with their foot and said, "We don't waste timeouts carrying rookies off the field." So I crawled off the field, and then the joke part of this that's not quite true is I go to a teammate, Junior Coffey, and say, "Man, I'm blinded in my left eye." He said, "Turn your headgear around. You're looking out the ear hole, buddy." That's how it felt. I think about that moment, I realized what the NFL was really about.
So it was different.
It was so different.
Yeah. And what about the differences between Coach Lombardi and Coach Shula?
Well, they were both great human beings. I hated Lombardi when I was there, and I said so after I left, and I'll regret that all my life. I had to go to his hospital and beg his forgiveness, which he granted, which proved that his priorities really were what he claimed: your religion, your family, and the Green Bay Packers, because he forgave me when I least deserved it. I've never forgotten that. But Don Shula understood me, and he understood all of us. His greatest gift, I think, was the capacity to build relationships with each player, so that not only did we play for each other and to win the game, but we played for him. My first game with the Colts, he thrilled me to death. He made me special teams captain. Like I said, Coach Dodd taught us to play special teams. So I'm walking out with John Unitas for the coin toss. And wow, big deal. We were playing the Falcons. And about the middle of the third quarter, I clipped a guy right in front of our bench on an 80-yard punt return. So the punt return's called back. Shula runs on the field, grabs me by the shoulders, shakes me, and screams profanity that would have made Lombardi proud. Well, if you come across the white lines in the NFL, they're not any nice guys, so I screamed profanity right back in my head coach's face without thinking, as usual. So Tuesday morning, we're watching the film, and John Sandusky, the assistant coach, said, "Curry, is that a clip?" I said, "It might be." He said, "Well, let me make a suggestion. Next time you decide to dogcuss the head coach on national television, you make very sure it's not a clip." So I'm thinking, Carolyn's flying in with our 5-week-old baby girl, and I'm going to be cut after one game with the Baltimore Colts.
Did you really fear that?
I really did. I wouldn't have blamed him. I went and found him. He took me in the equipment room, and I said, "Coach, I'm so sorry. I was out of line. You crossed the white line. You told us when we crossed the white line, we don't have to be nice to anybody, but I shouldn't have done that, and I promise you it'll never happen again." You know what he did? He smiled. You know what he said? "I kind of like that. Just don't clip the guy." And I mean, we would kill for him. I would have played when somebody understands you and gives you that kind of reprieve, and you think about getting your head across the front and not clipping people. And he said, we're going to be the least penalized but the most aggressive team in the NFL, and that's exactly what happened. And nobody could beat us. Same thing with Lombardi. Nobody could beat us, and we weren't always happy with when they put the hammer down on us, but we loved getting those Super Bowl rings in the mail.
Obviously so. Those were some dominant teams for
Yeah.
sure. And you mentioned the impact that you've had in terms of you still have players reach out to you consistently, and also just what you've been able to do for other coaches as well, like a Dabo Sweeney, just the words that you shared with him on a napkin. How does that make you feel?
You know about that too.
I do, yes. So
Dabo tells everybody.
Yes, he does. And it's a great story. And so just knowing that the impact that you've had like that, how do you feel about
Well, it's a great story
that?
because Dabo's a great person. I've put notes in other people's hands that didn't respond the way Dabo has. Dabo's just got such a powerful force toward good and toward excellence that he can do. What he does with his team is like nobody else I have ever seen, including Lombardi and Shula, certainly not Bill Curry. He gets those guys to win virtually every game, and they have fun. They actually have fun. How are you doing this? Dabo's got a sliding board in his. Have you been to his place?
I have, yes.
I said, I'm not going to do the sliding board, but you are. You're going to do it. And he did. He slid down that thing. But why would you have a sliding board? Only Dabo would do that. His players love him, and they play their guts out for each other and for him. So it's magic. And yeah, I am very proud of him because his values. He teaches his Christian faith by the way he lives, but he also teaches football and about getting along. And he makes the hard calls. That quarterback call he made this year, that's as hard as it gets. And then Saban does a similar thing with his quarterbacks, and all of the quarterbacks have responded very maturely. Even the one that's transferring did it in a class way. And those guys have been trained, and they're getting ready for life.
That's right. And with that, getting ready for life, one thing that I always really enjoy focusing on is words of wisdom. And that can be phrases, mottos, quotes, or just life advice. So do you have any words of wisdom that has meant a lot to you that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, all your soul. That's the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is just like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. That would be my advice. Comes from a much greater source.
Much wiser person.
Much wiser.
Yes. Well said. Coach Curry, I can't thank you enough for joining me on the podcast and allowing me to step inside your office. It's a true memorabilia room. That is obviously, and it's been an honor. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, Rich. Thank you.
Thank you.